Welcome to OState Daily. Casey Porter here. So glad that you decided to tune in. Fans, today we have one of the most special guests that I've ever brought into OState Daily, one of my favorite basketball players of all time. And that is saying a lot because I've been watching a lot of basketball players over my 51 years of life. Joey Graham joins OState Daily. Joey, how the hell are you, man?
Oh, I'm doing great. Doing awesome. Loving life.
Okay, man, I'm going to dive into the great stuff. I'm going to take you right back to that magical run, the Final Four run the last time OSU made the Final Four, some of your wonderful teammates, and what you remember about that, man.
Just thinking back, the most memorable thing that I can think of is when we first got to school that season. All the guys came in town and, a lot of new guys, a lot of new faces, and we were just all trying to figure each other out. And we knew that it was something special the first time we threw the ball up on the court, and everybody was competing. So I knew that that whole year was going to be a challenge, and it was going to be exciting because we had a bunch of just junkyard dogs on the team, and we knew we were going to accomplish a whole lot that season. You
did. I can remember like it was yesterday, Billy Packer saying, Joey Graham has the biggest hands in basketball. Got to see the hands, man.
They're still there.
Still would be the biggest.
That carried on with me into the NBA. They used to be like, they used to say that your hands are like as big as Dr. J's, and I was like, yep. That was one of the guys I used to watch a lot of film of growing up. Him and Michael Jordan. So.
Oh yeah, very nice. And your brother also played in that team, Stevie. I know he's still working in the NBA, right?
Yeah. This is going on year 7 with him, I think, for the Denver Nuggets. So he's the head player development coach over there, and he's been doing a great job with those guys, those young fellas.
What do you remember about Jameer Nelson and Delonte West, the two guards there for St. Joe's? They were awesome.
They had a great run that year that they started. It was a lot of hype going into that game, and we knew we had our hands full with just those two guys. And we knew that we had, Tony Allen, we had John, we had Daniel Bobick, and, some of the guys that came off the bench. We knew that we were a little bit deeper than they were. So it was going to be an exciting game, but our main concerns was to stop those two guys, and I think we did.
And you had a double-double that game. You also had a double-double in the Final Four game. But, I've got to ask you, what do you remember about the last moments in the shot and just watching the ball actually go in?
Well, I'll go back a little bit. Going into that game, a lot of people don't remember. I had food poisoning. Ivan McFarland had food poisoning. I don't think Daniel had food. Tony Allen had food poisoning.
I totally forgot about that. Yeah.
A lot of people don't remember. And I don't know if it was the restaurant that we ate at or if it was just a bug going around. But Ivan, Tony, and myself, we were just throwing up everywhere. We didn't have any fluids, and we were just loading down, Gatorades and all kind of stuff the day of the game. And we didn't eat. We were all running on fumes at the beginning of the game. So we had to find a way, dig deep, and just to even pull that game out because we were stretching on that one.
Yeah, man. Will Bynum is my least favorite player on earth.
It was a hard-fought game, that St. Joe's game. And we were going back and forth the whole game. They would score, we would score. And it was pretty evenly matched. And I remember that last play that was drawn up, it was for me. And it was a sweep action play we ran all season. And you can kind of remember I ran that same play when we had Memphis. And I had that big, huge dunk coming down the lane with Memphis, and that was kind of the same play that was drawn up. And some kind of way I caught the ball and slipped, and my whole sole of my shoe ripped off. And if you go back and look at it, you can see my whole right foot just slipped, and my whole sole of the shoe just ripped out from underneath me. So I had no other choice when they came and doubled to get the ball to John, and John just threw it up there and did what he did pretty much all season and hit big shots for us.
I watched a documentary on the 1983 NC State team, Lorenzo Charles and all of those guys. So I just kind of have to wonder, do you guys ever go to Eskimo Joe's or somewhere in Stillwater and sit around and talk about those great days?
There's not that many guys that live back here, but when I do, there's a few fans that come around and reminisce about those old days. And even just living here in Stillwater, I'll run into some old fans and we chop it up and we talk about the good old days with Eddie Sutton and all that kind of stuff. So it brings back good memories about that time.
Does it make you sad to see the way Gallagher-Iba is attended now?
It does. I'm upset, frustrated. There's a lot of mixed emotions that's going on because of how I know it used to be. Even before I got there, it was one of the best arenas to play in. And when we were there, it was one of the best arenas in the country to play in, right? So just to see it, and since I've been here and moved back into Stillwater, I've seen 4 coaches come through there. So it's sad, it's disheartening, but I think that the coach there now, Coach Lutz, he's going to do a phenomenal job because he's more of an old school coach. You know, he's back in those Eddie Sutton kind of isms. We call them Eddie isms. Okay? So he has a lot of that stuff in him. So I'm excited to see what they're going to do this season.
What's the one moment, maybe the practice moment, where it was so tough where you go, man, this old dude's crazy. What the hell?
You know what? There's so many. There's so many. But I can remember one time. This was our Final Four year.
Yeah.
Eddie was so in tune. He was so consumed about what it is that we had to get done. We were in practice. We were right there in GIA, of course. We went in the practice facility. The play was down on the south end of the court. We were playing on the south end of the court, and Eddie was sitting on our bench. He was right by our bench, and he was so focused. He was so in tune, and he could hear everything that was going on, even though he wasn't looking down at us on the south side of the court. And he knew exactly what we were doing, exactly what we were playing, but he was staring and looking at the north basket. And he got up and just started yelling and ripping. And it was the weirdest thing because we're on the south court, we're on the south basket. He's yelling at us at the north basket, and he knew exactly what it is that he was yelling at us about. And we're all looking at him like, we're Eddie, like, hey, we're down on this side. And Eddie was like, it doesn't matter where you're at. You got to set the screen like this. And he ran over there and showed us how to set a proper screen. And I'm like, Eddie, we're at the end of the season now. You don't have to come out there and show us how to set a screen. But he was so intense. He was so passionate about the details and the little things and about doing things the right way that he ran out there and he was just hobbling around, and he came over there and said, this is how you set a screen. This is how you do it. But it was an amazing moment because he was sitting and looking at the north basket, and we're down on the south. Everybody's down on the south basket. So it was an interesting situation that happened at that time.
Yeah, that's like sitting around the batting cages for batting practice, and you're not watching, and you hear it. You're like, oh, that sounded different, right? One of those
you can hear how that ball hits that bat, and you know exactly what it is. That's kind of one of those moments.
Yeah, he could sell ice to an Eskimo. Every time I listen to him talk, and he'd talk about the farm fresh Brahms type stuff, is like, okay, I'm immediately going to Brahms. He made you want to do exactly what he was telling you to do, right?
Oh, well, we did. 100%. Like, when Eddie would yell at us, like you had to get it done, or you were going to be running those stairs at Gallagher. And I know for myself and a few others in the past, Desmond Mason, a few other guys, we can count and know exactly how many stairs there are in Gallagher.
So was there a fear or respect, or is there a difference there? Does it matter?
There's a little bit of both. You know, Eddie was one of the most winningest coaches in college basketball, right? He's got that 700 plus moves, and he just demanded that. I don't want to say fear, but of course that respect. And you knew when he talked, you knew what he was talking about, and you can understand it. But Eddie had a way of saying things that brought out a certain fire in you, and he knew how to push whatever certain button that you had in you to get every little ounce of talent, skill, potential that you had in you. And he knew how to say it, and he looked at you in a crazy way. And if you didn't bring it out, if he couldn't get it out of you, he just kept coming. He kept coming like a bulldog. That's what we used to call Eddie, the bulldog. So he kept coming with you.
Yeah. I roomed with a guy actually in a trailer, Jason Turk, who walked on there at Oklahoma State and played a little bit of point guard. So I know that everybody that played for Eddie Sutton has an impersonation of him, right? So I got to have Joey Grant's best impersonation of Eddie Sutton.
There's so many, I can't even think of one. The one that used to drive me crazy. And I just, because I don't know if a lot of people knew back then, I didn't play with a whole lot of facial expression, a whole lot of emotions. If I was excited, I just smile and keep some, but he used to look at me and he'd stick that bottom lip out and he would say, Joey, every time. He would just say, Joey. And I look at him and I knew exactly what he meant when he called my name. And it was either something I did wrong or something I did right. And he said the same expression every single time. Good job, Joey. I tell you. Like, it's Eddie, man. He's one of the classic guys.
Man, and isn't it awesome as you get older and you look back on it? Isn't it awesome to be able to have the experience to have loved your coach? I mean, it's such a better experience to have positive memories about your coach than negative, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? We had a great coaching staff. We had Coach James Dickey. We had Sean. We had Sip. Ren Baker was a part of that staff. Coach Keller, Coach Williams, he just passed. Rest in peace with him. But we had a great coaching staff back then, and those guys complimented Coach Sutton. You know, when whatever he was lacking in, which wasn't a whole lot, those guys were able to pick up the slack, and those other coaches were able to communicate with us in a different way that Coach Sutton just really didn't have to. And one of my favorite coaches at that time also was Coach James Dickey. He's up there in West Virginia right now. Phenomenal coach, and I just love. He was, when I first came on the scene, Coach Dickey was there, and he was just he's kind of the one that sold me on coming to Oklahoma State. So I love that guy.
Yeah, kind of the yin and yang, it seemed like, because Eddie Sutton had kind of the intimidation factor, and then James Dickey could be the guy that could kind of put the fire out for it. No, Joey, he loves you. This is just what he meant, and so this is kind of where he's trying to get you to, right?
Oh yeah, and Sean, Coach Sutton, Sean Sutton was kind of a spitting image of him.
Yeah,
but Sean was great with the X's and O's.
Yes,
you know,
he was.
Eddie would say things to you, and he would want you to be able to picture exactly what he was talking to you about. Sean could go get that pad, that draw board, and draw it exactly how Coach Sutton would say it or how it was supposed to run it. And so we could hear it, we could see it, so there was no way that we could fail with whatever plays. And whatever play Sean came up with, it worked to a T. Like, it was awesome. It was perfect.
So when you had the football helmets and the pads, I mean, you had to be thinking, what in God's name are we doing, right?
Yeah. I don't know how many people know the full back end story of that.
Okay, I got to hear the whole thing.
We were playing. Do you remember who we were playing?
I do not.
Remember the team we were playing? Okay, we were playing BYU.
Okay.
We were playing Brigham Young, and one player on the team out-rebounded our whole team.
Oh, no.
One player. His name was Rafael Araujo. And it was a funny thing because when I got drafted to the Toronto Raptors, he was my teammate there. And we used to joke and clown about that situation every time. And I was mad at him because he made us do and get the shoulder pads and helmets on. But that one player out-rebounded me, Ivan, Jason Miller, Terrence, Tony, John, that one player. So when we got back, actually when we got into the locker room after the game, Coach looked at us, he came in there, he looked at us and he was like, we're going to practice when we get home.
When you got home?
When we got home after that game, after the game.
Oh, so my God.
We were on the road. We came into the locker room on that away. He came into the locker room. He was like, you guys let it. And I'm downplaying it because it was a little bit more dramatic. But Eddie said, when we get home, we're going to practice. And we knew exactly what that meant. So we flew back home. We got to GIA and we went right into the locker room and changed and we practiced. And then after that, I think we practiced about a good 2 hours that night. The next day, after practice was over, he was like, got a surprise for you guys. We didn't know. I didn't understand what that surprise was. But that morning, and a lot of people don't know, every day we used to have to go and check in with the coaches. We had to go talk to them in the mornings before our classes and say hello and see whatever it is, information that they wanted to give us for that day. So when we went to go sign in and check in the mornings before class, on the piece of paper, it said, go get fitted for shoulder pads and helmets on the piece of paper. So we read it. We had to sign our name because we checked in, and everybody was like, I don't know what that means. We're all in the locker room trying to figure out what get suited for shoulder pads and helmets was. Coach came into the locker room. He's like, why don't you guys have your gear in your locker? So he walked us right over to the football equipment room, and Coach had helmets and pads lined up in the football equipment room over there because it's right across from the statue in GIA, right when you come on the north side.
Oh, yeah.
So he walked us over there. They had a whole line of helmets, a whole line of shoulder pads in there. And Coach was like, try that on, try that one on. And if you never played football before, this is a funny story. If you never played football before, you know that you can't wear really tight pads and a really tight helmet because then you can't breathe, right? So a lot of our guys that didn't play football before, they would go get the smallest pads because they thought it was going to be the lightest, but it was really tight on them. And then they would get the straps and strap them down really tight. Awesome. So when we got to running our sprints in practice, they couldn't breathe, and they didn't understand why they couldn't breathe because their helmet was so small and their pads were so tight. So they were in there trying to take off the pads and helmets in practice because they couldn't breathe. But it was a fun, and it was a very grueling and hard couple days of practice because it wasn't basketball. it wasn't basketball. It was go hit somebody, go lay them out, and if you don't come out of this as a tougher basketball player, then you're probably just not going to play basketball. So it was a one-time experience that we'll never forget, and it goes down in the history books.
It does. It does. Yeah. I tell people all the time, hey, the kids haven't changed. It's the adults around them that have changed, right? So Absolutely. I tell people all the time, kids will still let you coach them very hard. They'll let you be what we call old school, right? If they know that you're coming at it from a position of love, if they know that you that you love them, which Eddie Sutton was the best at making you know just how much he loved you and how much he was doing this for your own good. So, do you think that style could still survive today?
In today's basketball?
Yeah.
No. So, how the landscape of college basketball is now? You would have pretty much every player in the transfer portal, and OState probably wouldn't have a team. And even before that, like we had a group of guys on the team that if you weren't tough, if you weren't cut out to play and play with us, we didn't want you on the team anyway. So how college basketball is now, it's a lot different. There's a lot, and I don't want to say softer, but it kind of is. You know, there's no loyalty, there's no commitment, and you know, these kids, I don't think they would have cut it back when we were playing because me, myself, my brother, Tony, Ivan McFarland, we would have just beat you up every single day.
TC.
We would have tried to make you quit. Yeah. And so when we had recruits in, we found out from day one if you were tough enough to even come play for Oklahoma State. Like, we had to know.
Yeah, we got to get that back some way, Joey.
Yeah,
we got to get that edge back, don't we?
It's a different generation. It's a different generation. I don't know if those kids are built the same way, but Eddie, of course, brought that out of you, and we knew that. And as players, we knew that we had to get that out of each and every individual player. So it was a culmination of both. And if you weren't cut from that cloth, you just had to transfer. You couldn't make it there.
So what's the loudest moment you can remember in Gallagher-Iba?
Oh, wow. Every Big 12 game.
Yeah.
And you know, when we used to go in, they used to camp out a day, sometimes 2 days before, you know, the Kansas game or the Texas game. And even back then, Texas Tech was amazing. They were pretty good. So every single Big 12 game was a crucial, important game. And Gallagher was just rocking. I can remember it was so loud in there. And when the students would start jumping, the floor would start bouncing. Yeah. And Pistol Pete would come out there with his gun in the smoke. And
Larry was on the mic.
Larry's on the mic. And those are the things you miss along with that camaraderie that you have with your teammates. But just going out there and playing in that atmosphere, there's nothing like it. I couldn't even compare it in the NBA. It was something different. It was something special.
So you grew up in Florida, right? You originally went to UCF. Yep. And so I can only imagine it was a culture shock coming to a school that, of course, UCF back then was a good school, but it didn't take basketball serious like OSU did. That had to have been a culture shock. So talk about that and then the reasons why you chose to come to OSU.
Well, back then, UCF was a football school.
Right.
Of course, they had a really great football program. And I think back when I first got there in 2000, they were the TAC conference, Transatlantic Athletic Conference. And since then, they've, skipped to the ASUN, I think, the athletic conference. And then they're, of course, in the Big 12 now. But it's come a long way. But they weren't a basketball school back then. And we were one of those mid-major schools that would come and play the OStates and the OUs and the Texas and get beat by 20 and 30 points. And so when I first went to UCF and I was looking at I'm in the same recruiting pool. Before I went to UCF, I was recruited by everybody in the country, the Dukes, the North Carolinas, the Floridas, the Florida States. And so when I would see all the guys in the country that we were playing against, and I'm over here at this small UCF school, and I'm trying to figure out why are we losing, why are we getting beat, why are we even trying to compete in our conference tournament to even get into the tournament when I know I'm good enough to even play against these guys. I played against them in high school and travel ball and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of put a chip on my shoulder. It lit a fire under my brother and I, that we knew that we could excel a little bit further than what UCF had to offer at that time. Now, it's a little bit different now because they are a big major team. They're great in basketball. They have a big arena over there now. But back then, it wasn't the same. And I didn't want my career to end just right there at UCF. And when I left there, I knew that was going to happen. So at that point in time, we had to try to figure out where else that we could go to excel and play at the highest level in the country. And back then, the Big 12, and I think it may or not still be the best conference in the USA, the Big 12. And I wanted to play for the best. I wanted to compete against the best, and that's who it was. So when we got ready to transfer, we were looking at the Texases and the Kansas and the OUs, and they were just coming off, the Final Four years in the Elite Eight. And you had, 4 or 5 Big 12 teams that were playing deep into the NCAA tournament. So why not want to go play for that? So when we left UCF, we had a good friend of ours that grew up with us. His son did, Ted Owens. You probably remember old coach from Kansas, went to OU. So he lived in Tulsa, and I told him he was the athletic director at St. Leo University back then, and we used to go into the gym, and he used to work us out and all that kind of stuff. And we told him, hey, we're interested in transferring. Do you know anybody we can talk to? Do you know anybody that, would be interested in 2 brothers that had 2 scholarships? And as soon as he hung up the phone, he called us back and he said, hey, come out to Oklahoma. And we knew it was either going to be Kansas, Texas, OState, or OSU. Out of those teams, OState kind of just put the icing on the top of the cake, and the rest is history after that. But Ted Owens is the catalyst behind that transfer and everything like that. And of course, back then it wasn't the same as it is now, which I wish it was. You had the redshirt a year, right? So I would have loved to just come in for after my second year into play, because when we first got to Oklahoma State, this is when Syracuse won the national championship. We played them in the Elite Eight, I think, the Sweet 16 or Elite Eight.
Yeah, Adrian Peterson kept hitting threes that game. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I feel like if my brother and I would have been able to help the team,
or if we had good officials,
that too, it might have been a different outcome, because we had Melvin Sanders, Victor Williams, Shane Gasson. Like, we had those guys that were awesome. And when I first came to Oklahoma State and we were redshirting that year, and we would compete against those guys in practice, those first 5, and the groups that we had in there, we were beat the first 5. So we knew we had a great team, and we were very competitive. And I wish we were able to play back then, but that's the rules of the NCAA back then. We had the red shirt, had to sit out a year, and then that following year was the Final Four year, and you know what happened then.
Yeah.
So,
So you mentioned a minute ago your NBA career, 4 years at Toronto, Denver, and Cleveland. You had stints with them. So what was the league like?
it was, so when I first came in, it was a shell shock. It was a rude awakening. They have the acronym back then, and it probably still exists now, what the NBA stood for, and it was no boys allowed.
Yeah.
And coming from where I came from, my pedigree, I embraced and I was ready for it. You know, I came in as this big, hulky, kind of strong guy. So when I first got into the NBA, I kind of just fit right in because I wasn't a boy when I left Oklahoma State. I was a pretty strong, full man at that time. So I kind of just seamlessly went right in when I got drafted into the NBA. Of course, I thought I was going to get drafted a little bit higher, but you know how the draft goes at that time. Like, people and teams and organizations select kids who they need to fit in certain pockets. And at that time, Charlie Villanueva and I, we were those first two picks up there in Toronto. So it worked out. It worked out pretty good. I had a pretty long career in the NBA. My brother and I did. But it was a shell shock when we first got there because it turns more away from how the game is played, and then you get to understand the business side of the NBA. And it's even more prevalent now because there's so much money. And so the college kids now, you can understand like how the NIL plays a part of that, how it turns a little bit more college into a business. And then it seamlessly goes right into the pros. And it was a matter of time before we knew that was going to happen. But when you first get there, you understand most kids should understand how to come into a whole bunch of money, how to invest it, how to save it, how to spend it. That was the culture shock for me when I first got there, because you come from, whatever background you come from, and then next thing you know, you're getting $1 million checks in your pocket. So it's a little bit different. But I think that the NCAA is preparing these kids a little bit better, I guess, with this NIL. And me personally, I'm kind of 50-50 with it. I'm for it and against it.
It needs rules.
They need a little bit more rules, a little bit more guidelines to get these kids, because you're paying these kids $700,000-$800,000, and then next thing you know, they're jumping ship. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Sure.
But I get it. These kids' name, image, and likeness, they need to get compensated for that. But there needs to be some type of rules put in place with it, of course.
100%. Couple fun questions here, between you and your brother, Steve. You mentioned him a couple of times. All right, who's the better three-point shooter?
Probably Steve.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Who's the better dunker?
Oh, me, for sure.
Can we still dunk?
Steve? Yeah, I can still dunk. Steve can still dunk too, but I would say he's a better three-point shooter because he probably shot the ball a lot more. We were twins, but I'm a little bit bigger, and we played different positions. Yeah. So Stevie was more of the point guard, shooting guard. Yeah. I was more of the small forward, power forward. So I was a bigger banger. Stevie was a more quicker guard and can get to the shots. But we were utility guys. We played whatever position you needed us to play. He was strong just like I was. We were both quick. We could both shoot. We could both dunk. We could both fly up the court. Yeah. So it was hard to guard us when we were both in at the same time.
I got to know all about the best game of horse you two ever played against each other and the shot that won it.
I'll tell you this. Growing up with a twin brother, we never were able to finish a game.
That's awesome.
It got too competitive, and then it would turn into a fight.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it was a sibling rivalry thing or if it was just the competitiveness in us. But if we played horse, if we played one-on-one, we never could finish because my dad or mom would have to come out there and stop the game completely. And so we took that from a very young age into high school, and then it was contagious with the kids around us in high school, and then we both went and took that to Central Florida and to Oklahoma State. So you can imagine the tough kids that we had at OState. There were a lot of fights in practice,
Yeah.
Just from me and my brother just out there saying, hey, if you want to compete, you want to come play, like there's the center circle, duke it out. Let's figure out who wants to win, who wants to compete, and who's going to play tough. And we took that mindset with us, and it worked. It worked for that group of kids that we had there.
Does your brother have any resentment that he was the sixth man? I mean, like, dude, I'm like an NBA player and I can't even start.
I think it's a lot deeper than resentment there because he wasn't even sixth man.
Okay.
He was more long down the bench than the sixth man. I mean, we had Janaver Witherspoon that come off the bench first for John Lucas, and then James on Curry. We had David Mons. We had Marcus Dove. Like, we had Jason Miller, TC.
Yeah.
All those guys came in the game before Stevie did. Like, if you guys don't remember, Stevie was like probably 9th or 10th man off the bench. And I knew what type of player he was. Coach Sutton knew what type of player he was. And I'm sure there's a little bit deeper stuff than just resentment there because he was the same exact player that I was, the same dog, the same competitor, the same fight that I had. He was just a little bit smaller. And so imagine John Lucas, or maybe not even John, Tony and my brother both on the wings.
Yeah.
Or even that, me on the wing, Stevie on the wing, Tony at the point. And then we had Jason Miller maybe at the 4, Ivan McFarland at the 5, 4 and 5, those spots. Imagine that lineup. So there was a lot of different things that we played with and Eddie Sutton played with the lineups to figure out what we needed to go and win. And it was a tough team. They had their work cut out for them trying to figure out who was going to be in the starting lineup and who was going to play significant minutes. Because my brother, when he played, and I can remember one game, we played Syracuse up in New York. He had 24 points.
Yeah.
Came in just unconscious and was just shooting and making. And then there were several games throughout the year. I can point out 5 of them that he came in right off the bench. First half had like 15, 20 points in the half.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that he wasn't able or capable of doing it. He just kind of, I guess, got lost in the shuffle of the lineups and whatever coach was trying to accomplish. So we had a deep, deep team. And I wish that they would have utilized them a lot more than they did, because you look at the end, he still made it to the NBA and played as longer career as I did, even longer than some of these other guys that were starters on Oklahoma State. You know, Tony and myself were probably the longest that played in that gap that we had there. And then it was John, and it goes down the list. But we had a talented group of kids there.
Do you have a funny story where somebody got you guys mixed up, a reporter or something like that?
Every day. Every day. Our coaches still probably couldn't figure us out. Like, I can remember stories where Coach Dickey would say our nicknames were Joey, Stevie, Stevie, Joey. He would say
hey, Graham.
that. Yeah, he would say that. And then Coach Sutton he would just say Joey, so he would call Stevie Joey all the time. He would call my brother my name all the time. But we knew who they were trying to get the attention of. So it was reporters and teachers, like even when we had classes together, it was all the same. But that's kind of what comes with the territory of being a twin. So we knew it. Sean
Sutton was one of the most intense coaches, players I've ever seen in my life. Did you ever look at him and go, that sucker's going to pass out? Did you ever have that thought about him?
Every single day in practice.
Yeah.
Coach Sean, like there's times when Sean would probably want to get out there with the basketball and come out there and play with us if he could. And he would get so red in the face and yell. And it was Eddie Sutton Jr., right? Yeah. Like it was Eddie in a younger body when he was out there talking to us. And if you didn't get it, he was out there throwing chairs and throwing notepads. But that's the passion, that's the intensity that he needed to have for us to get what it is that he was trying to convey to us. So it worked. It worked. And it came from both ends, from Sean, from Eddie, and the other coaches that we had there.
Want to finish this with one of your passions in life, and I've taken a lot of your time, Joey. I greatly appreciate all the time that you spend. We're going to have you fill in all the details from what you've done since your playing career until now, and then all of your pilot license stuff and how much you get to keep a fly nowadays, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So currently right now, I'm the head girls coach over at Perkins Tryon.
Oh, nice.
Yep. This is the second
year.
You
took Coach Burnett's spot, huh?
Yep.
You got big shoes to fill, dude.
I know. He's been there for what, 20 plus 30 years? So,
he's a stud, man.
Yeah, he was a big name through high school girls basketball. So I accepted that job. I mean, even before that, I was at Stillwater coaching the boys. So, but in between, just the high school and everything with the school, I have Graham Shooting Stars, and we do individual, group, private trainings, all that kind of stuff like that. So there's a lack of I guess, basketball youth here in Stillwater. So there's a big need, a big gap that has to be filled there. And so I came in and tried to introduce that, and still working on it to this day. So if we can get basketball here, like football and wrestling and all these other sports,
baseball,
I think that Oklahoma State basketball, girls and boys as a whole, we might not have to go too far to recruit if we can get some of these local kids talent and skill level built up from a very young age, like they do with football and wrestling and baseball and things like that. So it's a challenge, but it's a need, and I think that we can get it done here with that program.
Talk about your pilot license and how much you get to keep flying.
So that came from when my dad was a Navy pilot when I was young, and that bug bit me when I was probably like 7, 8 years old. I went up with my dad, threw up in the plane, and when I came down, I was like, yep, this is for me. and a lot of people would, look at it the other way. They're like, oh man, you throwing up. But it was something that intrigued me, and I wanted to do it. And so every time I had a chance to go with my dad, I flew with him when we were younger. And in between then, there wasn't a whole lot of flying until we got to Oklahoma State, because other schools didn't really have flight programs. So when we found out that they had one here, I signed up real quick in a hurry. But the only problem was Eddie wasn't a huge fan. Of course, we know why. And so we signed up, and our academic advisor, Marilyn Middlebrook, we call her Mom, she was like, hey, if this is something that you think you're going to do, like, let's do it. I'll talk to Eddie for you, and we'll figure out the rest. So she put us in all the classes, and we had a conversation with Coach Sutton, and we were saying, hey, when it comes down to it, Eddie, I'd love to take you up and fly with you. And I offered that to all the other coaches as well, but it never came down to it. But we flew, my brother and I both were pilots when we were in school here. So we both flew many, many hours, many, many flights. We would go to Dallas, Wichita, all over the place just to build up hours. But the thing about it is, once we left Oklahoma State, they had a clause in the NBA that you couldn't really do extracurricular activities. So if it was something that we did want to do, like fly, it was kind of like, don't tell anybody.
It's like pick up basketball for a baseball player. Just you can't tell anybody.
There's not a whole lot of things you could do within that contract that allowed you to fly. So it kind of went from flying every day to once a week, once a month, and it just kind of went away. But I'm back here in Stillwater now, and I've already told my wife, like, hey, I want to kind of get back out there and maybe fly. And I have daughters now that, they've showed a little bit of interest because they know that I flew back in college. So I might pick it up here pretty soon and see if there's some interest with the kids that want to do it, pass that on to the next generations.
Joey Graham, what a wonderful honor this has been. This has been just a great time for me to get to sit here and listen to these just awesome stories that you've been able to tell today. I can't thank you enough, man. Any final thoughts?
Absolutely. Oh man, thank you for doing this. Thank you for what you've been doing for the program, and I'd say keep it up. And anytime you want to talk back to me, I have a million more stories to tell. So
don't say that if you don't mean it. I'm going to hit you up, brother.
I mean it. There's tons more stories, and I'm sure we can try to get Ivan on here too, and we can maybe do a combo with Tony and John and my brother.
Oh,
that might be something that we can look into, and I'd love to hear some of those guys' perspective and stories on some of the things too. But it'll be fun, and I'm here when you need me, so just let me know.
Joey Graham, you're a stud, man. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. How about it?